let's talk about the real costs of renovation. Now, a quick primer for those of you who are just tuning in. A group of friends and I came together to purchase this land back in late 2020 and began renovating a few buildings here, including this one, in the beginning of 2022. Now, our whole goal is to live and work on this land, as well as creating a number of community-centric programs, which I shared in one of the previous videos here. And I share that with you because we are not house flippers. We are not short-term real estate developers looking to make a quick buck or anything like that. And we don't really have an exit strategy per se. So we really plan to stick around here. And I think one of the other things I could say is that we all like quality materials, workmanship, well-executed design, and we all have a particular interest in creating a quality living environment for all who live and visit here. And full disclosure, Sander has a background in carpentry and architecture when he was living in the Netherlands. He did leave that trade, but he did return to it and he likes doing carpentry. So that's like a really big plus and something for you to consider if you're actually thinking about doing renovation yourself. And this is really our first big renovation project that we ever did. So there's a lot that we have learned in the last 2 years, which we want to share with you. And I'm sure there's going to be like so much that we're going to learn as we continue this renovation journey. But what I hope that I could do today is at least help manage your expectations before you renovate, and then maybe communicate some of the current costs of renovations and whether you may want to consider doing the renovation yourself or hiring it out. Now, our situation is quite unique in the sense that we're working on this project as a group of friends. So that really does help in dividing up and sharing the costs and the workload. And also keep in mind that what I'll share with you today is really based on our unique experience. So it should just be taken as a data point out there, a little grain of salt versus like the gospel. And also keep in mind that there are temporal and regional differences when it comes to prices and available tradespeople to help on renovation projects. So we're in a really rural area in central upstate New York. Prices and people's services here will be completely different than if you're in like the suburbs of Boston or if you're center city San Francisco or even in another country, for example. Additionally, like how deep and detailed you may want to go in your renovations, like whether you just want to apply paint on the wall versus like full-on gut renovation, or whether you purchase IKEA furniture versus like custom cabinetry, will definitely result in major price differences. I'll be the first to admit that in the beginning, we had no reference for how much materials and services cost, save for the fact of like hearsay or like family folklore, which is like, you know, my dad saying like how expensive a sheet of plywood costs nowadays versus like what it was even just 5 years ago. And the reality is that we started our renovation during the pandemic when like material costs rose by at least a third, if not more. And in some cases, those prices have only gone up and they have not come down due to inflation. So for example, we eventually went with a different roofing product for this house. So this is the common house. And we called the manufacturer to see if we could actually return them. And they said, yeah, sure, because the supply was so low and the price is actually higher now. Same thing happened with our deck board. So we're actually replacing the deck of the common house, and we under-ordered the amount of deck boards that we actually needed. So we had to go back like a year later, and the price increased, and it was like quite a significant increase in price. I don't know the exact amount, but it was higher in price. So I would say if you're planning your renovation budget, I would first say plan for at least 1/3 higher price just to manage your expectations in your pocketbook. Like just give yourself a financial buffer. Now, when we got this place, we knew we would have to and would want to do renovation on the pre-existing buildings here. We were very fortunate because there were 5 buildings on this land already, which was a godsend because What we soon found out was that people were building like crazy during the pandemic, and any contractor was basically booked a year or 2 years out. So just having a building to sleep in or like put your stuff in was a major plus. But the main house here, which is the one I'm sitting in, that's the common house, or we call it the roost, it needed an entire window replacement, which we already knew was going to be a big one. Windows are very costly. There was major heat loss happening. Some of the window seals were broken. There was major heat loss happening through the roofing of the building. There's, unequal amounts of insulation in spaces. The mice were getting in from the exterior envelope and then damaging some of the walls. And we really wanted to make sure that the buildings that we were renovating were solid and it could reduce our energy consumption over time. So we also decided in late 2021 that it actually may be more feasible for us to sink our teeth into a smaller project first, which all of our family and our friends were basically saying, like, focus on a shed, focus on a smaller building before you actually get your feet entirely too wet and then you're taking off more than you could chew. That's amazing advice, great advice. If you've never done renovation before, definitely do that. I would pass that advice on to you as well. So we looked at this 600 square foot building on the land that actually used to be an old nursery office that we call the Meadow House now. And I'll link to that renovation here. You could see the whole process that happened over 18 months. So we started to really work on that before we dug our heels entirely into this place, which is the bigger 2,000 square foot home. And when we decided on doing that, like the smaller office, what happened is that it rolled over into renovating the barn because we wanted to have a workshop where we could work to build some of the other stuff that we wanted to do. We wanted to move the heating tank that was in the Meadow House into the barn. So we needed to make sure that that place was insulated so that we could get more space and actually to have the bathroom in the Meadow House. There was a lot of things. So you could see how things easily get out of hand. You start to work on one project and it leads to another. So yeah, projects really started to pile up. And I think when we started to step back, we said, okay, with these buildings, maybe we could do all of these buildings over the course of 3 to 5 years, but hopefully by hiring folks. And boy, were we wrong. Firstly, many people more knowledgeable than us will share that 60 to 75% of your costs for renovation will be for labor and not the materials. If you are not doing the work yourself, I would say that that is a fairly accurate estimate. Labor costs are high, and skilled tradespeople like plumbers, electricians, contractors, tilers, painters, they're really hard to come by. And let me tell you this little side story that made us realize that we would have to do a lot of the renovations ourselves. So we hired this they're kind of like a small design and contractor firm here. And we needed to get some architectural plans for this building, the common house, so that we could go and get a building permit and do the renovations. And so we asked the firm to give also an itemized quote from them to renovate the common house. Because again, we were always planning to help on the renovation, but never do the renovation ourselves. So this was a quote for this space, the common house, not the Meadow House, not the barn, not the chicken coop, just the common house. And they quoted us $600,000. And that wasn't even for high-end finishes and fixtures. It was more for mediocre fixtures. And I don't even think it included the deck replacement, which we've already started to do. And not even for nice roof tiles on the roof replacement, which we already did. So they quoted us way more than what we even paid for this land with all of the infrastructure that came with it. And we have a lot of infrastructure. We have 5 buildings, we have 4 wells, we have 2 septics, we have 5 major water bodies, roughly 90 acres. So let that sink in. One building to renovate is worth more than all of this combined. So, I mean, how would you react? I mean, my initial reaction is that I just laughed like out loud because it was so exorbitant. And I just want to be like, I don't want to sound too crass either, because quite frankly, they could charge what they want. There really aren't enough people in the trades. Like, we as a society, like, have been talking generations of kids out of getting into the trades, or convincing kids that the trades are like beneath other white collar folks. But let me tell you, having grown up in blue collar America, where my great grandpa was a coal miner, my grandma was a seamstress, my grandpa did construction, my aunt and uncle next door were farmers, and my dad is a truck driver who like built our house with my mom and their friends. I have a real deep appreciation for the trades and the skills that come with it. And we dedicate even a good portion of this channel to highlighting these trades and skills too, especially because many of them are becoming lost arts. But this like de-education of doing things for yourself and like learning trade skills, even basic trade skills, really has resulted in a generation of people who know jack shit about how to do anything outside of using like social media. Okay, so that's my soapbox. Let's get back to the we'll get back to the renovation. So that quote that they gave us was such a wake-up call. And I mean, we basically had to reconvene, reconsider, and recalibrate, because we, even as a group of working people, could not afford that. So if we wanted to hire a design and contractor firm, know that probably $400,000 of that would have strictly been for labor. $100,000 was slapped on top for a design fee, whatever that is. And like $100,000 would have been left over for our materials, our fixtures, our finishes. So when we actually started to look at those numbers from that perspective, we said, well, if we learn to do this ourselves, I mean, we would immediately just get rid of that $100,000 design fee right off the bat. And we may not be able to get rid of all the labor fees, because we would need to like hire specialized people like electricians, or just have an extra set of hands to help do some of the grunt work. But if we could do a big percentage of the work ourselves over the course of maybe like several years, as opposed to maybe like 1 or 2 years for the building, then it would actually start to make a lot more sense. Now, something that like maybe most people don't take into consideration is that if you are doing the work yourself, there's really only so much time in the day. So you may be displacing the other professional work that you do, or the precious time that you're like spending with your family or friends or what have you. But like, I guess for this argument's sake, let's just keep it strictly economical, meaning like you are reducing your earning potential by trying to save money by doing the renovations yourself. So you'll have to do those, calculations and see if it's worth it for you. So we made the decision that we would largely take on the renovations ourselves, and we would just come to terms that it would happen over a longer period of time. And that would definitely mean more juggling of our professional work and the renovations, but we would also be learning so much in the process, which is absolutely empowering. And we would also have this like peace of mind that we are not getting price gouged, which would allow us at least to have more funds left over for better materials and finishes and fixtures, and really allow us to do more renovations for less, which is something that we really care about. Another positive thing that I would say that came out of that like bloated $600,000 renovation quote was this kind of, I guess I could say like internal challenge for us in seeing if we could do all of the main building renovations for like less than that, because that would just go to show you how much you can do by doing it yourself. Now, I mean, we are only, I guess, about 25 months into our renovations here, with like one of our renovations down and then two in various stages of demo and rebuild. So it's probably still too early to know whether that's possible, but from like the look of things and us like estimating the material costs and things along those lines, I think it's like pretty safe to say that we'll crush that number and stay like well below it. But you never know, because like renovations are full of surprises. All right, so I just shared about evaluating whether it's even worth your time to do the renovation, and that's something that you'll just have to determine for yourself. But something that we do here at do at Flock here, and maybe this will be helpful for you, is that we keep track of our hours worked on the renovation, and then we assign that a monetary value. So it's like $25 an hour, $35, $45 an hour, depending on like the going industry rate and the skill level of the person. And we do that because as a group of people, we are putting in unequal amounts of capital and investment and work hours in. So we want to acknowledge and value those extra efforts of the individual people involved, so we keep track. However, even if you're not in the same situation as us, I would still encourage you to keep track of your work hours and then place a value on your time, because that will give you a quantifiable number of time spent and the money saved. Plus, you can compare that to what you would have been making if you were strictly concentrating on your professional career outside of the renovation. And then that will really give you a better understanding as to whether you could farm some of that labor out to contractors or continue to do it yourself. Now, on that note, let me just share some of those numbers with you, because I think this will help put it into context. So we finished renovations on that 600 square foot meadow house, more or less, and back in November of 2023. And we recorded the number of hours spent working on it and the contractors we hired. Now, these aren't going to be like exact numbers per se, because, for example, we had like contractors come in to like pour a patio, and they just gave us a flat project rate. So that project includes both the labor and the materials, and we really don't know how much went to the people versus the materials or the equipment fees and the like. So this is more or less like our best guesstimate, but the contracted labor that we paid out of pocket for the meadow house was roughly $15,000. However, I personally put in the equivalent of about $11,000 worth of labor. That works out to be roughly 440 hours for me. And my building rate actually comes cheaper than Saunders' building rate, because like I'm not as skilled a carpenter as he is. But Sonder ended up putting in the equivalent of about $60,000 worth of labor in the meadow house. So combined, we theoretically saved ourselves around $71,000 worth of labor costs by doing it ourselves. Then you can ask yourself, well, how long would I have to work my professional job to pay for $71,000? And that's one way that you could weigh whether the labor is actually worth doing it yourself. Now, I could actually probably argue that we saved ourselves more. And one reason I could argue that, especially for the meadow house, is because Sonder built the entire custom kitchen from scratch, including the cabinets, the banquette seating, and the hood vent just right above the stove. And kitchen and bathroom remodels are typically the most expensive rooms in the house to renovate. And we know that if you're actually hiring someone to build a custom kitchen, you will be spending beaucoup bucks. And some other folks here on YouTube who do this professionally share that if you are renovating a 100 to 200 square foot kitchen, which, you know, the kitchen in the meadow house pretty much is, it's about 150 square feet, then you would likely spend somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 or more if you're doing custom cabinetry. Now, we actually didn't parse out the renovation cost room by room in the meadow house, but I can tell you that we did not spend anywhere near that. So even though that we hired, some contractors for the meadow house outright, like I said, $15,000 worth of contractor fees. I estimate that by doing the design and the renovation largely ourselves, we easily cut the costs of the meadow house by 60 to 70%, if not more. And I'm not factoring in the design fee on top of that. So just kind of throw that out the door. But one of the downsides, I think, is that it actually took us, we estimated that it would be about 12 months to finish that renovation. It took us 6 months longer to do the work, but that's probably just going to be like one of the trade-offs. Another benefit of doing the work yourself, though, is that you really get exactly what you want. And I was talking to Sonder, and maybe I should have said this before, but the kitchen build in the meadow house, he was saying that he got that banquette and that cabinetry down to like the millimeter. And it was so symmetric in the kitchen that it would have been nearly impossible for someone else to do that without taking these obsessive measurements along the way. So that's another thing. You're going to just get like the quality of work that you put in, and you will get exactly what you want. So I suspect we'll probably save a similar percentage on the common house, this one that I'm sitting in now, by doing the work ourselves as well. And maybe we'll save ourselves a little less because we're doing like way more work on the larger structure, and we have hired like more contractors to help out because it's just like a bigger beast. But I think that initial quote we received from the renovation on the common house, we could probably do all the renovations for the 3 buildings that we're currently renovating with very nice fixtures and finishes for 20 to 30% less than their quote, largely by doing the work ourselves. And I think if we spread that cost over the course of 5 years and then divide that up amongst ourselves or divert some of the cost through revenue generation, then it becomes far more manageable and worth the extra grit in the grind. Now, this is another thing I should have probably said earlier, but like Sonder wanted me to point something else out, and I think this is the utmost importance. Really doing the work yourself is a serious commitment that will just take a long time, especially if you're doing a big reno, and also if you're only committing like nights and weekends to it. And if you don't like it, you probably should just hire people out. Like if this stuff is not interesting to you, if you don't really want to learn how to do it, then it's just going to be a lot more work for you. And that's where you should probably just say, okay, I'm gonna hire this out. Because it really does take time to educate yourself on like how to do the work properly, familiarize yourself with like the tools and the structure of the home, the architectural diagrams, and like lots of extra things that you may not actually think about. Like I can't tell you the countless hours that we spent like lost in the halls of like Home Depot or Lowe's or any other of the local hardware stores, getting building permits, getting the electrical inspector, even scheduling the electrical inspector in to make sure that the house is safe and you could get the certificate of occupancy and all that good stuff. As you could tell, we have had a lot of learnings and takeaways in like the last 25 months. And there's probably gonna be so much more that we learn over the next like 2 to 3 years. But I trust this actually puts real life renovation costs into perspective and helps you figure out whether it makes dollars and cents to actually hire the labor or do the work yourself. So that's all we have for you today. Until next time, see you in the next video. Bye. We'll be tracking more of our renovation journey here at Flock in future episodes. And we've been getting requests for our layout and design of the 600 square foot meadow house we recently finished. So you can head over to our website at flockfingerlakes.com, click on the Learn tab, and we have a 50+ page downloadable document for purchase there. We'll see you in the next episode.